this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter-Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to Briefings Direct. Our next business innovation thought leadership discussion focuses on how companies are exploiting advances in procurement and finance services to produce new types of productivity benefits. We'll now hear from an expert on how data, process integration, and analysis efficiencies of cloud computing are helping companies to better manage their finances and have tighter control as well as better collaboration over procurement and their supply chain networks. It's a mouthful, but we're here to learn more about how trends are driving innovation into invoicing and spend management. And with that, please join me in welcoming our guest. We're here with Joanna Martinez, founder at Supply Chain Advisors and former Chief Procurement Officer at both Cushman & Wakefield and Alliance Bernstein, and she's based in New York. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to be here in the Big Apple.
Right. So what's this notion of redesigning procurement for agility? Isn't agility sort of forcing procurement to change, or should we hope that they're able to change themselves along the way?
I speak to a lot of chief procurement officers and procurement execs, and people are caught up in this idea of we've got to save money, we have to deliver 5 times the cost of our group, 10 times, whatever their metric is. And they've been focused on this, and their businesses have been focused on this for a long time. The reality is the world really is changing. It's been a 25-year run of professional procurement and strategic sourcing focused on cost out. And even the most brilliant of sourcing executives at some point in time is going to encounter a well that's run dry. Now, sometimes you work in a manufacturing company where there's a constant influx of new products. You can kind of move from one to another. But those of us who have worked in the services industries, in real estate, and other kinds of businesses where a tangible good isn't made and where it's really a service, don't always have that influx. And, there's it's a real conundrum. It's a real problem out there. So I believe, though, that events and these changes are forcing the smart procurement people to think about ways they can be more agile, accept the disruption, and figure out a way to continue to add value in spite of it.
So perhaps cost out still important, but innovation in even more important?
That's it exactly. In fact, I've seen some things written lately where Accenture did a piece of work on the future of procurement, an organization of one, I think it was called. And they talk about the metrics changing and that procurement evolving into an organization that's measured on the value it adds to the company's strategy. And, people talk a lot about changing the conversation. I don't think it's necessarily changing the conversation. I think it's adjusting the conversation, because I don't think you walk in after you've been reviewing your cost savings for the last 5 years for the CFO that you've been working for. You don't walk in one day and say, hey, now we're going to talk about something else. No, you get smart about it and you start to think about the other ways you're adding value, and you enhance the conversation with those. So you don't go from 100 to 0 on the cost savings part of it. There's always going to be some expectation of value added in that piece. But I think you can show, relatively quickly that there's a whole lot of other places.
While it might be intimidating to some, it seems to me that there are many more tools, technologies that have come to bear that the procurement professional can use. They have many more arrows in their quiver if they're interested in shooting them. What do you think are some of the more important technological changes that benefit the procurement activity?
Well, right, all these services in the cloud, right? It's a lot cheaper, a lot faster to move to something new. So that disruption of taking an organization and trying to put in a product that's integrated with every piece of data, and you've got servers and you've got a large IT community managing it. It's not over because a lot of those legacy systems are there, but as the new types of technology come out, people can, learn about them and figure out ways to bring it to the company. I am going to speak later tonight, and one of the things, I have a picture of an assembly line and an automobile assembly line, and it says, "This is yesterday's robot." When you talk about robotics, people think of Ford Motor Company. The reality is robotics are being used in the insurance industry and in lots of other industry that's processing a lot of information, right? There's like the robotics of technology. The procurement organization knows these suppliers. It's incumbent upon procurement organization, I think, to start to bring that new knowledge to companies.
We also, Joanna, hear a lot of these days about business networks, whereby moving services and data to a cloud model, you can assimilate data that perhaps couldn't have been brought to bear before. You can create partner relationships that are automated and that create wholes greater than the sum of the parts. How do you come down on business networks as a powerful tool for procurement?
Well, procurement has to get over the not invented here syndrome, right? Procurement wants to be, and by the way, over the years I've been as guilty of this as anyone else. You want to be in the center of things, right? So you want to be the one at the meeting with the suppliers coming in and the new product development people at your company and things. The procurement organization has to understand and make friends with the product development and the revenue generating side of the business. Understand then how those people almost like turn 180 degrees and look to the outside world and understand how the supplier community can help to create those networks, then move on to the next one. And then quite honestly, be smart enough in the contracting and be smart enough in things like the termination clauses to make sure that those networks can be decoupled.
Now, you may not be able to name them, but do you have any examples of organizations that have really jumped on the bandwagon around redesigning procurement for agility? What was it like for them, and what did they get out of it? It's always important to be able to go and show some metrics of success when you're trying to reinvent something.
If you're looking for an example, right, you've got Zara, which is the global retailing chain. Now, Zara changes their product constantly, right? They're known for their efficient supply chains. They have some in-house manufacturing, right? And that in-house manufacturing gets done by themselves. But it's for the basic product, the high volume things, the places where lean manufacturing is important because the variability is low and the volume is high. Right? When you get to things like the trend of the minute, be it gold buttons or asymmetrical hemlines or something like that, they're using a network of third parties to do that. In those cases, the volume is low, the variability is high, and so they create and disassemble these networks. I think also, whether they realize it or not, financial services companies, there's a lot of agility built into that, right? So there are some firms, some third parties that a financial services firm will use to get those shareholder reports out. They send them the monthly reports, and there's the companies that do that have very high volume, very excellent quality controls, post offices that are on site, so they don't even truck it to you to the post office. The post office is sitting right there, and the mailings go out. When you need to do something, for example, a special mailing on a particular fund or shareholder meetings that might only be held once every couple of years, you find yourself in a situation where those kinds of networks don't serve you very well, and you have to kind of assemble and disassemble.
Now, we hear a lot these days with services organizations in particular that finding labor and skills is a big issue for them. It seems to me that when we look at some of the tools that procurement is using and the role that procurement is playing, that perhaps there's some more synergy between procurement and human resources management than we've seen in the past. Do you see that as a potential benefit when you're looking for agility in procurement, that they should be working hand in hand, perhaps using some of the same platforms and methods, procurement and human capital management?
Well, human capital management is an important organization for procurement to bond with, right? So often in a company, there's a lot of technology spend, there's an awful lot of HR spend, and not a lot of professional third parties on the using of that spend, right? So there's lots of people who can advise you on insurance policies, but they're not always using the best tools to go out and find those providers. Sometimes there are, relationships or payments or things like that, rebates and that sort of thing that accrue to the company. I think in human resources and in legal and some of the other parts of a company that often use services, there are technology solutions that are coming in place, right? So if you've got a procurement specialist working with HR who knows a lot about recruiters and doing deals with recruiters, well, they better be learning how to do a deal with LinkedIn, right? They better be able to be understanding that those traditional service providers are not going to be there any longer.
Last question. What advice would you give procurement professionals who are interested in redesigning their procurement for agility? Maybe they haven't begun that journey fully. What would you advise them as sort of important opening position steps or thinking?
Okay. Two things. Number one, there is no reason for your organization to call you up one day and say, okay, well, you can do this different. You have to be self-motivated, and you have to recognize that the change has to occur, do it yourself. And I was going to say ask forgiveness, not permission, but you're not going to have to ask forgiveness because you're going to find lots of good things. The other thing is that there are supply chains embedded all through organizations, even when no one in the organization has heard the term supply chain. So procurement organizations have to think about making sure that someone in their group understands supply chain or understands that mentality of owning something from start to finish. Because as long as you're looking at discrete little pieces, you're not going to extract the maximum value.
So get to that strategic level probably as fast as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a BriefingsDirect Thought Leadership podcast discussion on how companies are exploiting advances in procurement and finance services to produce new types of productivity benefits. And we've heard how technology innovations from new services from such cloud suppliers as Tradeshift are translating into business impacts. So please join me in thanking our guest. We've been here with Joanna Martinez, founder at Supply Chain Advisors. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you, Dana. It was fun.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this Tradeshift-sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.